Welcome and good afternoon to NTV, turning on your world this afternoon. Time check is 4 p.m. and this particular 4 p.m. hour is going to be special because we're going to be focusing on a particular conversation that I know is going to be raising some dust, shaking some tables, but at the end of the day we also trust that it will come with solutions and a way forward. The backbone of it is that women constitute over 50% of Uganda's population. Now their economic empowerment is therefore critical if the country is to achieve realistic development and transformation. For us, inequality allocation of unpaid care work between men and women remains a major limitation to women's participation in the labor market. Now when you look at a report, Women's Economic Empowerment in the Changing Work Report. This was of the Secretary General, and this is in reference to December 2016. Women and girls spent more time on unpaid domestic and care work, which is valued at 39% and 10% respectively. And this is in consideration of the gross domestic product. Now, this can contribute more to the economy than manufacturing, than commerce, than transportation sectors. Therefore, there is need to agree on specific actions that could be taken, one by policy makers, others being cultural leaders as well as religious institutions, to change the narratives, to change the beliefs and perspectives on the allocation of this particular conversation between women and men, most especially for us here in Uganda. It's upon this background that the Forum for Women in Democracy, in partnership with S-Policy Research Institute, are holding a televised dialogue under the theme Equal Allocation of Unpaid Care Work, and this is starting now all the way to 5 p.m. here on NTV Uganda. Now, my panelists are experts in these conversations. We do have the Commissioner Gender and Women's Affairs, Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and that is Madam Angela Nakafero. She's with us. We also do have Reverend Nathan Mugalu, Executive Director with Family Salvation Foundation. But also we do have Georgia Tumwesije, who is a women's lead and leadership program manager with FORD, which is the Forum for Women in Democracy. All these are going to be painting us perspective from the government side, civil society side, but also religious side in a holistic approach to this dialogue. Follow us on the hashtag Care Equality as well as hashtag Unpaid Care Work. My name is Priscilla Regina Naloga. Welcome to this dialogue. Now allow me to turn to my panelists for their salutations before we get into the deep of the discussions. I know that in a certain room somewhere it's already a heated debate, but before we get into that, I'd like to introduce my guests. So my immediate left, I do have the Commissioner from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Would you give us your salutations?
Good evening, viewers. Thank you for hosting us.
All right. Next to her, we do have Reverend.
Yes, good evening, viewers. We are very excited to be here, especially discussing the concept of unpaid care work. We are very excited and looking forward to the deliberations.
All right, and then next to him we do have FORD representation.
Yes. Good evening, dear viewers. My name is Georgia Tumwesije. I am the Women and Leadership Program Manager at the Forum for Women in Democracy, and I'm happy to be here today and excited to engage in this conversation.
Yes, it's quite exciting, and our specific objectives at the end of the day, one, we want to emphasize the advantages of women taking part in productive work, and also the implication of that on the country's GDP as well as the economy. The other objective out of this dialogue is to create awareness on the role of culture and the role of religion in recognition of socio-economic changes, debunking misconceptions and emphasizing the advantage of reducing unpaid care work for women. But also at the end of this hour, we hope to appeal to government, to policy makers to subsidize taxes on energy-saving cooking equipment and care items like diapers, which got a slap of a tax in the other financial year. And at the end of the day, also advocacy around outsourcing help and policy for minimal wages for maids. All these embedded in this discussion. But the big question I know you have right now is, what is unpaid care work? Georgia, let's start from there.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. First off, the Forum for Women in Democracy is a women's rights organization that was founded in 1995. So we are pursuing a vision of a just and fair society where women and men equally participate in and benefit from decision-making processes. And therefore, gender equality is at the heart of all the work that we do. Now, unpaid care burden, the debate rages on, but it just simply relates to, you know, the provision of direct or indirect work without remuneration carried out mostly within the household. It's care roles like, you know, raising children, cooking, looking after the sick and the elderly, shopping, cleaning, helping out with chores. It's really as simple as that. Now, these activities are considered work because ideally you could pay someone else to do all that work. But we have women doing all this work, women and girls doing all this work without a single penny, and it's become normalized, and that takes away from the economy. Yes.
Okay. How does that directly take away from the economy?
Now, the ACE Policy Research Institute carried out a scoping study in 2023 and on the forms and causes of disproportionate, you know, allocation of unpaid care work between men and women in Uganda. A total of 1,800 households were visited, and so in the central we had 18% households being visited. We did 30% in eastern Uganda, 26% in northern and western, 25%. Now, the differences in the percentages of houses that were visited during this scoping study is based on the number of districts in these different locations. You know, every other day there's a new district. So you have to be careful to ensure that, you know, there is equal representation. Now, findings actually confirmed that traditional gender roles significantly influence society expectations. The Ugandan culture, like really many others, traditionally view women as primary caregivers. I mean, even the way we are raised, just stemming from a young age, girls are socialized to, you know, just take on domestic tasks. There are households where in the morning it's the girl child that is being woken up very quickly. You know, what sort of woman are you going, what sort of wife are you going to make? The socialization is even in the way we raise the children. You will find that many times they'll buy a girl a toy, a doll to play with, and buy a baby boy cars to drive. And yet when you on the streets of Kampala today, I mean, everyone here came driving, and so
you wonder why the girl grows up to want a man with a car.
Exactly. So the girl grows up wanting a man with a car, and the man wants, you know, and yet, you know, boys could play with dolls as well because they're going to be fathers. So how are they being socialized and raised to be able to take care of these roles? There are economic factors in Uganda that influence gender roles as well. You know, access to formal employment opportunities for women are limited, especially for women in rural areas, which means that they are likely to engage in unpaid care work as well. The impact of religion. The impact of religion. I recently got married and, you know, even from the classes, the marriage instructions, you will notice that it is subtle. They don't even realize that they are doing it, but they are preparing you to be this carer in the household. Yes. And also it's likely that even when women get into formal employment, there is then a double burden of unpaid care work. It is not uncommon for a woman to enter a conference room and they expect that you're the one who is going to be pouring out the tea during the conference and
help us serve the water.
You know, please pass around the water. Sometimes even before they understand that you are who you are. And you know, it's the socialization is in such a way that the man or the boy child has been socialized to go for where the money is. If you do a scan around most of the hotels in Uganda, the cooking jobs that are highly paid, these are chefs that I'm talking about, who are the majority of chefs in the world really. even the celebrity chefs, most of them are men, because men have been socialized to go for where the money is. And yet the cooking role traditionally has been assigned to a woman, the unpaid role.
The unpaid version.
Yes, the unpaid version is by a woman. Where there is money, you will even find, you know, a man just getting into that space. And so that is the unpaid care work that we are here to deliberate on, and, you know, hopefully find a way that we can work around allocating equally.
All right, turning to the commissioner here. But before you speak in your capacity as commissioner, you're a mother and you have raised children. Let's talk about this in a more realistic sense, from your own experience, the unpaid care work. What did it look like in your own homestead, and how would you have rectified it?
Thank you very much, Priscilla. First and foremost, unpaid care work is vital for our own well-being. At the family level, even at the community level, unpaid care work is vital, because a majority of us wouldn't sit in offices when we know there's nobody looking after those young ones. We wouldn't sit in offices, be productive, if you know you have a sick person at home and nobody's looking after that sick person. So we need to make it very clear that unpaid care work is very vital to our well-being, but also to national development. Where I find a problem is the burden that my sister is talking about, that is not equitably shared among family members. That becomes a challenge. And of course, the other aspect is where unpaid care work is used against the provider in terms of access to education, because very often our young girls drop out of school the moment they reach a level of adolescence. Mothers allocate roles and responsibilities, and then they are drawn out of the school education system, and of course that becomes a lifetime missed opportunity. You're not going to finish education, or if you do, your performance is dictated against. If you're able to finish, then even employment opportunities, as Georgia is talking about, those are issues. So in terms of our own context, especially if I reflect back on my own experiences, we definitely had to pay extra to get somebody to look after the young ones and the sick, to give you a helping hand. However, society is changing. Work of we call them house managers, they're becoming very expensive. And of course we put our lives at stake when we leave them in our homes. It really depends on the person who is providing the work to be responsible and care for the family. So there's quite a lot of missed opportunities because we are not sharing out equitably in terms of unpaid care work.
When you say sharing out, in the present day times and the changes that you have spoken of, the evolution of the workplace and really humanity by and large, how would we share these unpaid care work collectively, regardless of gender?
What it means, Georgia talked about it, the starting point is in terms of how would we socialize, how would we divide work at the family level. This business of saying this girl must do this boy must be do, I think we need to adjust such that right from a tender age, we both learn to know what is expected of us within our homes. My daughter and my son should be able to cook, such that this girl, if time comes and she needs to concentrate on her studies, this boy should be able to step in. The cleaning of the home, but also the caring of other people. Because quite often we have sick persons, we have the young ones who have to be cared for. We have to produce food for the common good. And where I find that out of 10 family members, only 2 or 3 are participating, it means that we are not going to produce enough food for the home. and of course issues of malnutrition, hunger, and why we find that we are not contributing equitably in terms of preparation, for instance, food. There are power dynamics that come into. The husband will come back and demand for food. If it's not there, it becomes a source for gender-based violence.
From a certain restaurant at office, yes,
so,
eaten fruits, groundnuts, but he comes up because in his mind it's been programmed that he should also eat the woman should present food. Whether he eats it or not, that's another story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as a country, because we are not sharing these roles, we are missing a lot in terms of development, in terms of equitable access to opportunities, education being one of them, income generating being another, and of course employment. If you're not employed, you may not be able to put a plate of food the following day or for the entire month. Yet this is what we are expected to be.
We're glad to be having a religious leader joining us for this conversation, Reverend Nathan Mugalu. This is a tough one. It puts you in a tough spot because if I'm to think of the nature of your work, you are constantly on the road attending to your sheep more than the sheep that at your household. So that alone is misallocation. But in your own perspective, you have had to deal with especially couples and families that have had a challenge of allocation of roles and responsibilities in the pretext of gender. No, this is my role. I'm a provider and I'm doing my job properly. I'm giving them money. I'm putting food in the fridge. I'm taking the kids to school. Your job is to do ABCD squared. How have you been able to navigate such circumstances from a religious perspective?
That puts me in a corner. However, we have gender roles, but also we have life skills. So it's very important that in whatever that we do, we balance up that. Quite a number of people will say, well, this is my gender role, this is what I'm supposed to do. But at the end of the day, we ask a question, when you do it, what happens? Domestic work and paid care work is very important. First of all, nobody can survive without unpaid care work. Number two, it is also a form of training. Sometimes when we see families raising boys that you're not supposed to do work, the question is,
you're not supposed to do
homework, domestic work.
Even mothers have a tendency, I did
don't do that.
Yeah,
don't do that. So the question is, what is the training ground for young boys, for young men to learn how to work? Because I look at the concept of unpaid care work in the perspective of training, and that is my first, take. Where do young people learn how to do work? Where do they learn resilience? Where do they learn life skills? All these are learned through the unpaid, the domestic work that we do, because, before we train a man to go out there to hustle, to kuyiriba, to do whatever, they should have learned these skills, they should have learned these competencies from home. So at the end of the day, by the way, even this also has an impact on the general adjustment of an adult. An adult that grew up as a child, without doing work, without that training, without that responsibility, normally they turn out to be very messed up adults when they grow up, because things like self-care, things like cleanliness, things like life skills, things like livelihood skills, survival skills, all are learned from home. So therefore, at the end of the day, that's why we stand in my work. I stand to challenge the notion of, you a boy, don't do this, you a girl, don't do this. So we normally pose this question: is it about gender roles, or it is about life skills? Any child that grows up and they're not doing work, any person that grows up and they're not doing work as a child, they will not work even when they're old. They will not learn. Okay, some people say, maybe boys don't do work. When you grow up, you'll marry somebody to do for you that work. And no wonder in my work of mentoring young men and boys, I go as far as visiting them in their rooms where they stay, and you find a lot of mess. Then, okay, now, if there is somebody that will do for you this work, how about when you travel for work? Aren't you going to bathe? Aren't you going to cook? Aren't you going to do your laundry? Aren't you going to do basic self-care activities? So at the end of the day, my experience is we are changing. These are no longer gender roles. These are life skills that everybody should possess in order for them to survive and also compete in a highly competitive world. So that's my first take. The second take is unpaid care work. Yes, it's very important, but why do we have a problem with it? It only becomes a problem in my perspective when it makes some, especially women and girls, vulnerable to the extent of not going to school, to the extent of not participating in the economy, to the extent of not achieving their full potential, to the extent of not being able to take on opportunities as they come, to the extent of even women in employment not fulfilling their roles. So at the end of the day, that's why I have a question. It is very good work, and all of us survive because of that work. It only becomes a danger when it disempowers. But also, there are also unpaid care work in homes, yet men are the beneficiaries. A woman goes for digging. After harvesting, it's the man to sell, and it's the man to maybe give her some little money. They are working for the family, and where boys and men, maybe they are taking alcohol, they are in junctions, doing ludo, doing all this, and at the end of the day, women are the ones doing most of that work. But at the end of the day, we find that this crumbles and cripples their upward progression, to the extent of being financially vulnerable and dependent, also emotionally dependent, but also being subjected to a lot of gender-based violence, humiliation, and missing opportunities because of unpaid care work.
Okay. Yeah. All right. You have mentioned barriers, but your barriers were more tilted towards the girl child or the women.
Yeah.
And which would be the natural case. But yet there's, I believe, even bigger barriers and the cost to country and economy on the side of men. Let's talk about the barriers on the side of men.
These barriers are many, and the major barrier here is the negative social and cultural norms and beliefs. We have had a history of women being vulnerable. We've had a history of women not measuring up to the standard or not being human enough. So at the end of the day, you find that the unpaid care work, in most cases, when it makes women vulnerable and inefficient, simply because that is it. Women are supposed to be in the garden. Women are supposed to be in the kitchen. Women are supposed to take care of children. Women are supposed to do everything. Men, what are they supposed to do? Maybe they should be looking for money or whatever. But also there are communities where actually quite a number of men are simply taking alcohol in bars. The man is in the bar from morning, but the issue of the negative and harmful gender norms and roles. Now, the gender norms leads us to the issue of power. Power imbalance. I have the power. Much as some people say toxic masculinity, but we believe that masculinity is a positive attribute. So people with distorted masculinity, people without masculinity, because masculinity dictates that you protect your family, you take care of your family, you participate in the parenting, the upbringing, the mentorship, the modeling of work to children and everything. So the issue of power imbalance, negative power, toxic power leads to this. And sometimes we ask men, okay, so as a man, if you don't get involved in work, who is going to teach the boys that men do work? no wonder we have a generation which has some people that cannot do any work because they have not seen their father doing work. Simple things like washing clothes, simple things like cleaning the house. There are men that have never seen a man do so. So they believe that, okay, if I don't have maybe a woman in my house, then I should maybe eat the whole week and keep the utensils under the bed. Yeah. I should put on a vest for 2 weeks. I should put on my undies for a month. I should not change my bed sheets for a year. You get that? So at the end of the day, the power becomes
allow me to take the microphone away from you, because I know reverends, you know, religious leaders can go on and on. But in the way you have presented, you know, your submissions, begs the question: where do we distort this in the first place in terms of allocation? And I'll come to the commissioner in that regards, and also allow me to stroke it as call you mama. It's a conversation we were having earlier on in terms of allocation of this unpaid care work or the domestic work, and you were very vocal in saying that it's the responsibility of women, as you know, the caregivers, the nurturers, to be able to distribute this work accordingly. But yet we seem to be having also these women's distribution of work being the root cause of why we're having this conversation and this imbalance and inequality in the first place today. Let's talk about that.
Reverend has really raised quite a number of issues. Of course, we learn by seeing, by doing. All of us, we've learned to be clean, be responsible, look after the home, look after the young ones. I remember when we were growing up, my mother would leave the young ones under my care, and I would do whatever I could. By so doing, I was learning the roles that I find later on in life very, very important. So for me, where we need to change, honestly, is in terms of educating our daughters, our sons. And I would like to differ slightly from Georgia. Majority of us, we learn by seeing our mothers doing whatever they do. Yep. And in most cases, it's the mothers that insist, this is your work, you must do it. Yep. They divide up work among the girls and the boys. So for me, that gives us a great opportunity as women, as mothers of this country, that if we want things to change for the better, reduce the burden of unpaid care work on women and girls, the starting point has to be at home. Yep. When we are training, when they are still young, training the girls to cook, training the boys to be able to cook, training the boys to wash utensils and sweep the compound. Those small tasks later on translate into bigger tasks that dictate who is doing what and at what time. So as women, we have that opportunity to nurture the boys and girls equitably when it comes to unpaid care work.
However,
and of course, within the education system, there are also processes of inculcating some of these roles. So that is a great opportunity that we need to use.
Okay, Georgia
complementing what government laws and policies have already defined.
Georgia has a contribution to make, just to reshape the narrative, I believe.
Yes, I want to reshape the narrative, and I want our viewers to think differently going forward, the ones who are not yet on board. The reason as to why Angela differs from my thought will also go back to upbringing. She grew up seeing her mother nurturing, doing all the exact reason as to why we are having this conversation today. On the other hand, I was raised by a gender-forward father. He created house chore timetables for all of us. We are a family of 5 kids, 2 girls and 3 boys. Now imagine if all the care work was only left to the 2 girls and the 3 boys were not involved. So I believe that it is both the mother and the father because my father showed me what it is like to even have gender equality in the home. He created timetables for care work. If I cooked today, my brother would be charged with the dogs and the compound and cleaning. The next day, my brother will cook and I'll be charged with the compound and cleaning the house. So it was rotational, and it became so normal. It became so normal. You know, it propels you into knowing, you know, I am more than this. We had the same time, you know, wake up time is the same time. We were policed around reading time as well, so we had time to read. So I believe it is both. If you see your father participating, you know, in care work, it is going to be normal. And I also just want to clarify. Unpaid care work is not good. Care work is good. So care work is okay, but we are saying that it should be paid for or redistributed, recognized and redistributed, so that women can participate in more productive activities. Beyond that, we are going to perpetuate gendered poverty.
All right, we'll come back to the element of how do you cost it, how would you pay it in this day and era. But Reverend, you being the man on this panel, yes, Mama said it's the primary responsibility was given to mothers to be able to ensure that each child, male or female, can be able to have equal participation in allocation of domestic work. However, from my perspective, where I've been able to analyze how men are raised in a passive manner. It is what I see my father do is what I do. They go by the Jesus statement of I do as I see my father do. So if my father folds his hands, even if mother tells me to do these things, I will grow up, or at school I will be folding my hands because father folds his hands. If my father is not engaged in cleaning or keeping you know, the house in good condition, I'm not going to do that. And now at home I will do it because mommy says so, and there's repercussions to that. In another community and setting, school, later on as an adult, it will be a different story because they are passive learners, and that is a default setting from how of the system of how men are raised. Let's talk about that. How can we change that narrative to have men active so that the younger generation can see from them, learn from them in order to do and participate actively?
Well, men first of all, men should get involved in work. Men should get involved.
You added some scripture to it.
In the name of Jesus.
Men should participate in work. Men should participate in the upbringing of the family. And we can achieve this. Despite the fact that quite a number of men are not doing and not living up to that standard, we are doing a lot of work to make sure that men can be in homes. Men can be in homes to mentor, to model, but also to train their children.
Let me just edit a bit. Men can be in homes, because there's also this narrative, and I've heard it from men, that if you go back home early, you're not considered as responsible. A man should be coming back home, let's just eat and you know,
it's also socialization
and go to bed. If you come back early, then that means you're not working, you're not being a man, quote unquote. So
it is
at what point is the boy child going to learn?
So all what you're saying are actually facts on ground, because we have some families where they have fathers, but also our experience tells us that out of 10 homes, 7 homes have no fathers. That's a very painful reality that we live with. And part of our work of mobilizing men and boys, like I said, one is men coming back home, men returning to their homes, and men doing their responsibilities in homes. Because we have said this to men over and over again, that our boys are not going to do what they have not seen us doing. In most cases, our boys will imitate what they see the men in their lives do. And in most cases, we have told men that it is actually men that can raise men. Many people can raise boys, but it takes men to get men out of these boys. So in our programming, in our advocacy, we tell men but also there are some beliefs that have not helped men and boys, but yet men continue to believe in them. So part of, for example, men don't do work. Like I said before, how a boy is going to learn care work, how a boy is going to learn how to do work, how a boy is going to learn resilience and leadership if their fathers or the men in their lives are not doing their part and not doing their roles. So at the end of the day, we are doing a lot of work at demystifying some of the myths and misconceptions about care work. And like I said, I repeat this, care work is not a gender role. Care work is a life skill that all of us need for survival. Just imagine a man that cannot cook. I mean, how are they going to survive? No wonder we have obesity in men, we have malnutrition in men, we have so many things, because I mean, you can't do. By the way, even getting a sense of dietetical awareness, it comes from home. Care work teaches men a sense of fashion. No wonder we are struggling with men on as far as fashion is concerned, simple self-care, but it's now a job of adult men. Are our boys going to do what we tell them, or they are going to do what we are doing?
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Let's turn to the page where it actually affects economic empowerment as well as the country's GDP by and large. When we see a lot of attention being put on the girl child in terms of unpaid care work or domestic work for that matter, in turn what you're telling this person in the future is that it's okay, you can grow up and you can still be a woman and you don't have to worry about getting a job. If you don't get a job, it's okay, you have these jobs that you have to do already, primarily by virtue of the fact that you're a woman. Take care of your home, give birth to children, and at times we have seen that being used to their disadvantage by men in the name of housewife. Like, no, you can be a housewife, or a guy can pay you to be a housewife, and yet crippling their ability to contribute to the country's economy. Let's talk about that, Georgia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Priscilla. Now, the burden of unpaid care work really limits women's participation in the paid workforce. And now that also means that it takes away from the country's resources, it takes away from the country's potential development. We want to achieve the Vision 2040. We want to grow, we want a transformed Ugandan society. From peasant, we said we want to go from peasant to modern and prosperous.
Yep.
We cannot become a modern and prosperous nation if we have majority of the population held back out of productive activities. We were talking about, female-headed households. In the scoping study that was undertaken by APRI, 38% of the households, just the 1,800 households that were visited, were female-headed. You're going to be shocked by the statistics that come out of the current census that is happening right now. Quite a number of enumerators were even shocked. I had my neighbor being asked, oh, where is the head of the family? And she's the one, but the socialization is that, it can happen, but that is, and I want to agree with Reverend. I mean, men come back home, come and, and participate in care work so that the country develops at the same pace. Women spend, according to UBOS, women spend over 6 hours in unpaid care work compared to men who spend 1.4 hours. Now, you see...
them have to contribute a straight 8 hours.
Exactly. Now, that also shows that, yes, men are also engaged in care work. It would be unfair to say that they are completely not spending any time, but we're just saying that women and girls have been socialized to pay more attention and to work more. Even in your office, you have an 8-hour job, but the UBOS statistics say that women are spending over 6 hours in unpaid care work. more than men. So that means you also have now a double burden. It's like a double-barreled problem that just keeps hitting at women. You are expected to deliver at work, many times also perpetuating gender roles in the workforce, and then you go back home and you have to just pick up from wherever you find the household. And that has also led to that, the wage gap. We have the wage gap right now is approximately 39%, still according to UBS, because it just limits women's economic opportunities, financial independence, restricts their access to education, and professional development.
Focus on my home. After all, it's the most important element of my being.
And we are not saying that home is actually home is really the most important.
Yes.
But we are saying it can happen. It should be most important to both, to the man and the woman, so that both are also equally and participating in and benefiting from decision-making processes. And paid care work also keeps women on the periphery of decision-making processes. That means that if we are back home taking care of all these care roles, we are not in decision-making processes. And we all know that many times, if you are not at the table, you're going to end up on the menu. So that means that even women's priorities are not going to be reflected in plans, budgets, and policies because they are not part of the, decision-making processes. And the cycle goes and on, Then we continue to have feminized poverty that Angela likes to talk about, So the cycle just continues, and another worrisome indication jeopardizing gender equality as a whole is that women's jobs are actually 1.8 times more vulnerable to crisis, and yet women just make up 39% of the workforce of the global employment, but account for over 54% of job losses since May 2020, the COVID pandemic. It just revealed all these structural weaknesses that we have globally when it comes to pursuing gender equality.
One of the structures
and equal pay.
that we do have is the government structure. So I'd like to have the commissioner coming in terms of policy level and programs. What initiatives, what steps has the government taken in ensuring that there's women participation in productive work amidst the care work that we're talking about?
Really, so many initiatives are going on. Of course, in terms of reducing the burden of unpaid care work, you find that government has been deliberate in terms of bringing the services closer to people. I want to give an example of education. It's deliberate that schools are constructed in each parish, primary schools, then secondary in each sub-county, and technical in each of the counties. So the intention is to reduce on the time spent by children walking to schools and coming back, but also providing an environment where children can stay safely and learning. Because if they were not in school, then it's to be the mother to make sure that she's at home to look after these children. Another vivid example is in terms of water. We all spend a lot of time collecting water. So when water is brought closer to the family, the time spent collecting water is reducing. So that alone reduces the burden of unpaid care work. I can go on and on. Agriculture is another way, providing high-yielding varieties such that the family can get more produce from a smaller acreage and be able to feed the family very well. So there are so many, bring the roads closer to quicken transport for you to reduce on the time taken walking, bringing the health facilities closer, bringing electricity closer, whereby you're able to use electricity in terms of some of this unpaid care work that women do. So it's a deliberate effort to reduce the burden. It has to be also a deliberate effort in terms of redistributing. That is very, very vital. And this is where the family plays a critical role. Of course, government has defined the laws and responsibilities, making it easy for all of us to share roles and responsibilities. But as my colleague Georgia and Reverend are insisting, the practice has not caught up, has not moved in at the same speed with the speed at which government has been enacting laws and developing policies. There are also several programs. We talked about poverty, feminization of poverty. There's so many programs that government is implementing in terms of reducing poverty, making it easy for women and young women to start income generating activity. So drawing them from unpaid care work to paid work, wherever they are. So that is also a very important program.
Okay. All right, turning to you, Reverend, let's talk about the role of religion and culture in challenging the stereotypes that presently do exist, and also promoting positive portrayals of men's responsibilities, engagement and involvement in caregiving.
Yeah, when you look at unpaid care work, it is normally a function of religion and culture. And because religion and culture forms public perspective, forms beliefs, and forms practices. Therefore, it is religion and culture that can do, that can complement and supplement on the works of the civil society, government, and all the leaders to make sure that we redefine, but also we redistribute care work. Number one, striving for gender equality and equity. That's the work of religion and culture. Because gender disparities, gender vulnerabilities, feminization of poverty, feminization of incapacities, normally it is orchestrated by religion and culture. So involving gender equality and equity programming in what we do, that would do great work. Then you find that religion has structures at all levels, just like culture. So making religious and cultural spaces safe havens for women to thrive. Women and girls cannot thrive when they are being made vulnerable because of unpaid care work. Care work should be an enabler for people, for women to achieve their milestones, to achieve all their goals, and to be great. Then the other issue is demystification of some of these negative norms and practices in our communities. But religion and culture has a major role of involving men and boys, men as partners in achieving gender equality and equity, men as partners in achieving conducive environments where women, where girls, where children thrive, where everybody achieve their milestones. Men and boys as partners in fighting and ending gender disparities and gender vulnerabilities. So that's a major job for religion and culture, involving men, because in most cases, we're not saying in all cases, but in most cases when there are such issues, sometimes men are the beneficiaries because they'll just see it, they'll just be there without burdens and all these things. So involving men, but also attending to men and resolving or finding solutions to some of the challenges that men face. Because when you walk on the roadside, when we walk in the villages and find men drunk, and probably this is one of the reasons we are here, but we are not only here, but we're also in the communities, finding men where they are. Because this message of redistribution, redefining of care work in homes should reach men and boys wherever they are. Okay. But now finding drunk men, men that are not productive, men that are not going to school, these are going to be agents of unpaid care work, but also continued vicious cycle of vulnerability, vicious cycle of poverty, ignorance, and so many things.
Georgia, in conclusion, as Ford, I'm going to give you the closing remarks in 2 words. What's the way forward, especially in redirecting women's participation into productive work?
Yeah. Okay, so first, the Forum for Women in Democracy over the last 29 years has been building, nurturing, and sustaining women's leadership and economic justice. We pioneered legislation you know, we've contributed to the reform of budget processes to have the Public Finance and Management Act of 2015, the first ever gender and equity certification process in the world. Forward, ACFORD, and other organizations also worked and lobbied for the establishment and funding of the Equal Opportunities Commission to ensure equal opportunities for all. We are transforming the lives of women and building their financial resilience as a catalyst for their participation in leadership, you know, which we believe is very, very paramount. To also ensure that women are not left on the periphery of development processes, really, Forward facilitates lactating beneficiaries and staff to participate in initiatives with babies and their baby minders. We know so many programs where you cannot get in there if you're a breastfeeding mother. And yet some roles like breastfeeding cannot be relegated to anyone else. Also to say that, you know, Forward is spearheading the construction of the Imara Women's Center, which is going to be a sanctuary for learning, sharing, and it's going to have an infirmary, it's going to have a lactation room and a nursery. Also, it's going to have lettable office space, which means that care roles can be brought to work, so you're participating in productive work, but also you're very sure that you know, on this other side your children are well catered for. One of the things that the government would need to do is gender responsive budgeting and taxation. Do not tax care items like diapers and menstrual health products, honestly. Someone said tampons and pads were a luxury item in Parliament, on the floor of Parliament, and so that means we are being taxed for bleeding, and I'm going to say that on national TV. Yeah. Religious and cultural institutions need to be at the forefront of you know, just spearheading mindset change. Also, addressing gender issues in unpaid care work requires policy changes even in the workforce. Let's have flexible working hours for some jobs that you do not need to step in office for. I mean, let the person work from home. COVID showed us that people can effectively work from home. They do not need to be in the office. Also, outsourcing help is okay. Let's stop stigmatizing outsourcing help.
You have a house
the nannies and home workers.
You're not doing your job as a woman.
That woman is lazy. She's, you know, she has two nannies and so on, but she is paying them. So they are also earning a living while she's also engaging in more productive work. And you know, our GDP grew by 5.3% during the first quarter of the financial year 2024. Currently, Uganda's GDP is over 45 billion US dollars. Imagine what it would be like if all the women who are engaged in work that does not pay them in care roles got back on board. We would be able to achieve Agenda 2030, would also be able to achieve our 2040 vision of a prosperous and modern Uganda. And finally, it's a shout out to all the men who are doing an amazing job, because they are there, and you know, because the larger percentage is really towards women, they seem invisible, that 1% that is also undertaking care roles. So let us just recognize, reduce and redistribute care work.
All right. Yeah. Well, I would like to say many, many thanks to my panelists, Commissioner Angela Nakafero. Thank you so much for opening our eyes to, one, how government has actually aided in supporting the unpaid care work that we're talking about, so that people can spend less time and less resources and less energy in order to fulfill their primary duties, which are paramount. We cannot run away from them. If we were not having these skills, personally I'm going through the same thing right now. My mother is unwell, but if I had not picked up that skill from when I was a child, I wouldn't, as an adult, I'd be thinking, no, I should be paying someone else to handle that. But it's my mother. Why should I be paying somebody else to handle that? And also Reverend Nathan Mugalu, Executive Director with Family Salvation Foundation. First of all, thank you so much for the work that you're doing to re-empower men into their rightful positions, and understanding that with great power comes great responsibility here. And Georgette Mwesje, again, also thank you so much with Ford for making this conversation a real conversation and in real time, because now more than ever we need to realize that these are some of the things that if we correct them, if we arrange them accordingly, we can empower ourselves as a country to be able to contribute equally and equitably to national development as far as the economy is concerned. So it's upon those words that we bring these conversations to bed. Thank you so much for having been with us, and we trust that they have lifted you up in terms of knowledge, wisdom and understanding in how you can participate actively both in home care work, domestic work, as well as productive work. I am Priscilla Regina Naluoga. Good evening.